Welcome to the Heart of Mastery, where we explore powerful ideas that awaken the mind and transform the self.
Great to be diving in again.
Today, we're diving into the fascinating and, let's be honest, often misunderstood world of neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP.
Yeah, NLP, it gets talked about a lot.
Think of it as an advanced toolkit, really, for enhancing communication, facilitating deep personal change, and truly understanding the mechanics of human perception and evolution.
A toolkit's a good way to put it. A set of models and techniques.
Our mission in this deep dive is to extract the most potent insights from NLP. We want to trace its rather rebellious origins, understand precisely how it challenges many traditional psychological and therapeutic approaches,
And it really does challenge them, right from the start.
and then unravel its practical applications for deciphering human behavior and communication in everyday life. How can you use this stuff?
Exactly. It's meant to be practical.
We're drawing on a foundational collection of texts that, really define the field. Classics like Frogs into Princes, Turtles All the Way Down, Patterns of the Hypnotic Techniques of MD. That's Milton Erickson, of course.
A huge influence, Erickson. Massive.
Also, The Adventures of Anybody, Time for a Change, Transformations, Reframing, and The User's Manual for the Brain. Quite a reading list.
Foundational stuff. Really captures the early energy in thinking.
As we embarked on this journey, I have to confess, my initial impressions of NLP were nothing short of electrifying.
Oh, really? What grabbed you?
Well, when Frogs into Princes first burst onto the scene, the buzz, the endorsements were just incredible. I mean, Dan Goleman, Mr. Emotional Intelligence.
Yeah,
He didn't just review it, he called it readable, practical, and entertaining, which for this kind of material is, well, it's high praise.
Yeah, definitely. Not always known for being light reading, some of this stuff.
And then John O. Stevens, a really prominent figure in Gestalt therapy, he basically threw down the gauntlet. He stated, and I'm quoting here, that NLP makes most current therapy and education totally obsolete.
Wow. That's its bold claim. Obsolete.
Totally obsolete. And even Sam Keen, who is an editor at Psychology Today, described it as learning to do a little magic and change the way you see, hear, feel, and imagine the world.
A little magic. I like that. It captures the transformative feel people get from it.
That kind of high praise, that promise of something genuinely transformative, it just grabs your attention. It makes you want to understand what exactly is this magic, and maybe more importantly, what can it actually do for you?
It's interesting how those early endorsements, well, really effusive, they hint at the core philosophical departure of NLP, how it broke from the established norms of its time, especially in therapy.
How so? What was the big break?
Well, if you think back to the therapeutic landscape then, many therapists, whether they were trained academically or more informally, they tended to approach their work in what NLP folks called a content-oriented way.
Content-oriented, meaning?
Meaning they were intensely focused on what's wrong. Session after session, digging into the problem, its history, categorizing it, almost like checking off boxes on a diagnostic list.
So it was less about the how the problem worked and much more about the what. Like, tell me every detail of your issue and we'll analyze the content of it.
Precisely. And the deep insight here from the NLP perspective was that even therapists who claimed they were process-oriented, focusing on how a problem was happening, not just what it was, often fell into the exact same trap.
Jelly, even the process people.
Yeah. They'd say, oh, I work with the process, but then almost paradoxically, that very process would become a rigid, static event in their minds.
So it stopped being fluid and became this fixed thing to label.
Exactly. It transformed from a dynamic, ongoing thing into something fixed to identify, label, and then, apply some standard technique to. Rather than engaging with something truly dynamic and unfolding in the moment, it really makes you question how we even define what we're looking for when we try to help someone change.
And it seems like there was also this real discomfort back then, wasn't there? This feeling that if a therapist was too precise, too targeted in trying to get a specific outcome, it was somehow manipulative and therefore bad.
Oh, absolutely crucial point. And it really hits the philosophical core of NLP. Many therapists at the time would actually say they had no idea what specific outcome they were aiming for with certain interventions.
No idea, seriously.
Seriously. Whether it was a touch, a shift in voice tone, a specific question. And if you ask them directly, are you interested in finding out what outcomes your actions produce? Many would just flat out say, definitely not.
Why not? That seems counterintuitive.
It was precisely that fear of manipulating the client. NLP just fundamentally challenged that whole idea. It basically said, look, precise outcomes Understanding the structure of influence, being consciously aware of your impact, that's not unethical. It's essential for effective, predictable change.
So the vagueness wasn't ethical, it was just ineffective.
In the NLP view, yeah.
Yeah.
It often led to unpredictable results, a lack of accountability. The thinking was, if you're not aware of your impact, how can you really be responsible for it? It suggests true ethics requires more awareness, not less.
That's a powerful reframe right there. Okay, so let's unpack the absolute core premise, the foundation stone of all NLP. This idea that each of us operates not from direct reality, but from our own unique internal model of the world.
Yes. It's like we're each living inside our own personalized movie, constantly interpreting and constructing our experience based on this internal map.
And it's not just a metaphor, right? It's rooted in how our nervous system actually works.
Totally. It's deeply biological. Think about that classic vision in frogs analogy they use in the books. Light waves bounce off an object.
Okay.
But our nervous system doesn't just pass that raw data straight through like a clean window.
It's not a camera.
Not at all. It's an active filter, a transformer. It distorts, it generalizes, and it deletes that raw input. What we actually see in our brain on the occipital lobe isn't a direct one-to-one copy of what's out there.
Wait, you're saying we've never actually seen reality directly?
That's the profound insight. And it can be a real mind-bender. We have actually never seen what's there. We've only ever experienced our internal neurological representation of it.
Wow. Okay, so even sight, which feels so direct and objective, is a constructed, interpreted experience, not a perfect recording, more like an artist's impression based on filtered data.
Exactly like that. Our reality is this dynamic construct. It's shaped profoundly by two big forces, our genetics, how our specific nervous system is wired, and, maybe even more powerfully, what we've learned is useful throughout our lives. Nurture and experience. There's no perfect objective map inside us. The transformation of that sensory input is so intense that what reaches our conscious awareness is, in a very real sense, an extremely faulty input if you are comparing it to some mythical objective reality.
Faulty but useful. Functional.
Functional for survival and navigating our world.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have that one-to-one match. And maybe the kicker is we often don't even consciously know the rules of our own filtering system. It just happens automatically, which means your perception of this conversation might be radically different from mine, even though we're hearing the same words.
Okay, and these filters, these ways we build our models, NLP identifies three big universal processes: distortion, generalization, and deletion. Let's start with distortion. That sounds potentially weird.
Distortion is actually fundamental. It gives us this incredible ability to shift our experience of sensory data.
Yeah.
It's how you can sit there right now and easily picture, say, a bright purple elephant flying through the room.
Okay, yeah, I can do that. Never seen one, but I can imagine it.
Right. Or it's how you plan for the future. You imagine yourself achieving a goal. You feel what it's like, almost as if it's happening now. You're distorting time and sensation. This capacity is amazing for creativity, problem solving, envisioning possibilities, setting goals.
But it can go wrong.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
It can become a huge liability if it leads us to misinterpret reality in unhelpful ways, like twisting a neutral comment into a harsh personal attack, or believing your thoughts alone can magically cause external events. It's powerful, needs awareness.
Then there's generalization, taking one specific experience and applying it broadly. I can see the upside here immediately. Touch a hot stove once.
You generalize that all hot stoves are potentially dangerous.
Exactly.
You don't need to test every single one. It's absolutely necessary for learning, for efficiency, for just getting through the day without reevaluating everything from scratch.
But the downside?
The downside is overgeneralization. If you have just one bad experience, say giving a presentation, maybe you stumble over words, someone looks bored,
Yeah, that feeling.
and you then generalize that all public speaking is terrifying, or worse, that you are fundamentally bad at it. You've just impoverished your own model of the world. You've unnecessarily limited your future choices based on maybe one single data point. Even if that generalization isn't really accurate, it locks you in.
And the third one, deletion. This one sounds a bit like we're just losing information, which doesn't sound good.
Well, deletion is paradoxically vital. It's
Yeah.
mostly an unconscious removal of information from our perception or our language. And it's not just a quirk. It's absolutely necessary to function.
Why necessary?
Imagine for a second if your brain tried to consciously process every single thing right now. Every sound in the room and outside, every flicker of light, every tiny sensation on your skin, every single thought popping up.
Okay, yeah. Instant overload, total shutdown.
Exactly. You'd be paralyzed by an unbearable flood of data. So your brain runs this continuous unconscious filtering system just to keep you functional, focused on what seems relevant.
But the danger is filtering out too much. Or the wrong things.
That's where the limitation and pain can come in. If crucial details, important context, vital connections get consistently deleted from your internal model, it can severely impoverish your understanding. You end up operating with an incomplete map. For example, linguistically, if I say the window is broken, we delete who broke it and how.
Right. But we assume someone broke it somehow.
Yes, that's normal linguistic deletion.
Huh.
But imagine that happening to your internal experience. Say you delete the context of a challenging situation at work, and you only remember the raw feeling of failure. You've deleted the specifics, the nuances, maybe the things you did well, or the external factors involved. That can lead to chronic negative feelings or helplessness because you're missing the very information that might offer choice or a different perspective. It's like trying to navigate with half the map missing.
Okay, so we filter reality through distortion, generalization, deletion. Now, how do we store and process this filtered information? This brings us to representational systems, right?
Yeah.
VIC.
Exactly. VACOG. These are essentially our primary sensory channels, how we experience and store information internally. V is for visual internal images, mental movies.
Seeing things in your mind's eye.
Precisely. A is for auditory sounds, external or that internal dialogue, the voice in your head.
Okay.
K is for kinesthetic physical feelings, sensations, emotions. Gut feelings, muscle tension, warmth, cold, pressure.
The feeling channel.
Right. And then O for olfactory, smell, and G for gustatory, taste. Though V, A, and K are often considered the primary ones in most contexts, what's really fascinating is how we unconsciously access information through these systems.
And that shows up physically, like the accessing cues you mentioned, Sally mirroring Fran.
Yes, that's a perfect example of accessing cues. If you learn to really observe someone closely, you can often get the answer before they offer it to you verbally, as the books say. You see subtle shifts.
Like eye movements. That's the classic one, right? Eyes up for visual, down for feeling.
Eye movements are a big one, yeah. But also shifts in posture, tiny gestures, changes in breathing patterns, muscle tension. In that Sally and Fran example, Sally's eyelids subtly dropped a bit, mirroring Fran's, which is often associated with accessing internal feelings, the kinesthetic system.
So her body was kind of hinting at how she was thinking even before she said it.
Exactly. Her body was giving a preview of her internal state. It's an unconscious physical manifestation of the thought process. Like if you ask someone to think about driving their car, you might see a tiny, almost invisible shift in their leg muscles or hands. They're accessing the motor program, the kinesthetic, and visual data.
That makes so much sense. Our bodies are constantly signaling how our minds are working, even if we're totally unaware. And you gave that brilliant, comfortable example earlier, just one word.
Right, the word comfortable. For one person, bam, instant visual image. Hammock, beach, sun.
Yeah, I can see that.
For another, it might be an auditory thing. The sound of a babbling brook, quiet music.
Or just silence.
Or silence, exactly. And for someone else, it could be purely kinesthetic. An immediate physical sensation of warmth, relaxation spreading through their muscles. Same word, totally different internal experiences.
And that process has a name.
That's what NLP calls transderivational search. It's a key insight into how language really works. Words aren't just labels. For you to understand me now, your brain doesn't just passively receive sounds. It has to take these words and instantly access their meaning from your unique, vast personal history.
So it's searching my internal database.
It's an immediate, unconscious deep dive into your store of images, feelings, sounds, smells, tastes associated with that word. So comfortable acts like a trigger, pulling specific bits of your personal experience into consciousness while leaving others dormant. Communication is so much more than just the words. It's the internal landscape those words light up.
I remember reading about Richard Bandler, one of the co-creators of NLP, and his own story about not being able to see images. He genuinely thought people were just, kidding about visualization.
It's a fantastic example of how different our internal worlds can be and how unconscious these preferences often are. Bandler literally thought visualizers were using a figure of speech.
Wow. So how did he learn?
He spent years trying to force it, talking to himself about images, trying to feel them into existence, which apparently made it worse. His breakthrough came when he learned to do what NLP calls overlap.
Overlap.
Meaning, taking a system he could access, easily say, a feeling or a sound, and then consciously adding the visual dimension to it. Slowly, incrementally, like get a comfortable feeling going, and then gently try to bring up a faint image with that feeling.
Ah, so piggybacking the visual onto a stronger sense.
Exactly. And it worked. It shows this incredible potential for developing skills in our less used representational systems. We can actually expand our internal model, give ourselves more choices in how we process life. These aren't fixed traits. They're skills we can learn and hone.
Okay, so all this filtering, storing, accessing information, it leads us to how NLP, especially through Milton Erickson's work, sees the unconscious mind, which is different from the old Freudian idea, right? Not just a cellar full of repressed stuff.
Very different. Hugely different, actually. In NLP, and especially as Erickson demonstrated, the unconscious mind is much broader. It encompasses the vast, complex functioning of both brain hemispheres, operating almost entirely below conscious awareness.
So not just the hidden stuff, but all the automatic processes too, breathing, skills, intuition.
All of it. Erickson was a master at systematically tapping into those non-dominant hemisphere resources. He saw the unconscious not as a dark basement to be cleaned out, but as this incredibly rich, resourceful, creative powerhouse. A source for insight, for healing, for profound change.
A resource, not a problem.
A massive resource. The unconscious mind, in this context, is seen as constantly receiving and processing messages from inside us, from the environment often completely outside our conscious radar. And here's the critical bit. Because these messages often bypass the conscious mind's filters, its tendency to argue or judge,
They just land.
they often lead to unchallengeable responses. This is where Erickson's genius with things like analogical marking came in. He'd subtly mark certain words or phrases non-verbally, a tone shift, a gesture, a pause,
We'll get more into that later.
and the listener's unconscious mind would receive and respond to that marked message directly. The conscious mind might not even notice, so it couldn't argue or resist. It's about leveraging the mechanics of how our minds actually work below the surface.
Right. Okay, moving from our internal maps to how we talk about them, let's get into the meta model. This sounds like it's all about language specifically.
It absolutely is. Think of language as, well, probably the main model we use to represent our internal world to ourselves and others. The meta model, then, is like a model of that model.
A model of language itself.
Pretty much. It's a formal linguistic toolkit. Its main job, and it's incredibly useful, is to help us recover what NLP calls deep structure from the surface structure of what people actually say.
Deep structure versus surface structure. Okay, unpack that a bit.
Surface structure is the words we actually utter or write, the sentence itself. Deep structure is the full underlying meaning, the complete representation from which that surface sentence was derived. Often, a lot gets left out or transformed on the way to the surface.
So we hear the surface words, but the meta model helps us dig down to the full meaning underneath, all the missing pieces.
Exactly. And the core idea here, practically speaking, is often profound. People experience pain or limitations, not because the world itself is inherently bad or lacking, but because their internal map, their model of the world, is impoverished.
Impoverished.
They've deleted, distorted, or overgeneralized crucial information that would otherwise give them more choices, more flexibility, more resources. So the therapist's or coach's role isn't necessarily to give them new outside information. It's to help them enrich their own internal model.
To fill in the blanks on their own map.
Precisely. To recover those missing pieces, gain new perspectives, and by doing that, get a richer set of choices in how they behave and respond. It's about helping them behave inconsistently with their old limiting beliefs by expanding the map those beliefs were based on.
And the meta model provides specific tools, specific questions to challenge those impoverished models, especially the deletions we talked about earlier. Can you give an example?
Yeah, a classic one involves what's called an unspecified verb. A client says, "My father scares me."
Okay. Seems straightforward.
Does it? As a listener, you might think you understand, maybe drawing on your own experiences of being scared. But if you really stop and analyze it, you have almost zero specific information. How does the father scare him? By shouting, by being silent, by the certain look, holding something.
Ah, right. The how is completely missing.
Totally unspecified. The meta model trains you to spot this lack of specificity and ask targeted questions. How specifically does he scare you? When does he scare you? In what way? This is vital to distinguish what the client is actually representing inside versus what the listener might unconsciously and often wrongly fill in from their own map.
It forces clarity on the actual process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it reveals how much we assume in everyday conversation, leading to huge misunderstandings, both with others and even in our own internal self-talk.
Our brains just automatically fill those gaps. The meta model makes us notice the gaps and ask about them. What else?
Another common one is lack of referential index. This happens when words like this thing, that, enough, or vague pronouns like it are used without a clear reference point.
Like, it bothers me.
Exactly. It bothers me. What bothers you? Or I just don't have enough. Enough what? Or people don't understand. Which people, specifically? That ambiguity means key information about who or what is involved gets deleted. It invites the listener, again, to fill in the blanks, potentially inaccurately. It leaves the experience feeling vague, untethered, hard to change because it's not specific.
And then those big absolute statements, universal quantifiers, NLP calls them.
Yes, words like nobody, everybody, always, never. They almost always signal a limiting overgeneralization someone's made.
Like, nobody ever listens to me.
Perfect example. The meta-model response isn't to argue, but to gently challenge the generalization by seeking counterexamples. Nobody, ever, not one person, not even once.
Just poking holes in the absoluteness of it.
Exactly. It helps the client realize their generalization might not be 100% accurate, that there might be exceptions. This subtly loosens the grip of that limiting belief and opens up mental space for other possibilities, other resources they might have overlooked because of the generalization.
Okay, and nominalization. Sounds technical, but you said it's basically turning a process into a static thing, a noun.
That's a great way to capture it. It's the linguistic trick of taking an ongoing process, a verb, and turning it into a static noun, an event or a thing. So the verb to decide becomes the noun a decision. To relate becomes a relationship. To be frustrated becomes frustration.
And what happens when we do that?
When a process gets nominalized, crucial information often gets deleted. Usually, who is doing what to whom. If someone says there was a lot of frustration, it doesn't tell us who was frustrating whom or how it happened. It makes the experience feel more fixed, more like an object, less like something fluid you can influence.
So saying I have depression feels different than I am depressing myself or I am experiencing depression.
Absolutely. Turning it into a noun, depression, can make it feel like a solid thing you possess, like a rock you carry. Reframing it back into a process, something you do or something that happens, implicitly suggests it can be changed. It unfreezes the problem. But interestingly, nominalizations also have a powerful use in hypnotic work or coaching. By presenting something complex as a single thing, like your learning, your comfort, your potential, it invites the client to do that transderivational search, to find their own rich, internal meaning for that concept. It can deepen engagement. So like many linguistic patterns, it can be a limitation or a resource, depending on awareness and intent.
Fascinating. Okay, 2 more meta-model patterns. Mind reading and presuppositions. These sound like everyday occurrences.
Oh, they are rampant. Mind reading is when someone claims to know another person's internal state, their thoughts, feelings, intentions, without saying how they know. No evidence given.
Like, my boss thinks I'm incompetent.
Classic example. The meta-model challenge is simple and direct. How do you know your boss thinks that? Or what specifically did they say or do that led you to that conclusion?
It pushes for evidence, observable behavior.
Exactly. It moves the person from assumption, which could be totally wrong and cause loads of anxiety, towards seeking actual evidence or direct communication. It cleans up a lot of relationship static.
Yeah, I can see that. And presuppositions, these sound maybe even sneakier, like hidden assumptions baked into sentences.
They are, and they are incredibly powerful because they operate below conscious awareness.
Yeah.
Presuppositions are things that must be assumed to be true for the sentence to even make sense. They're the hidden bedrock the sentence is built on.
Give me an example.
Okay. If I say, Sarah realized her keys were still in the car, the word realized forces you to presuppose that the keys were, in fact, still in the car. The sentence doesn't work otherwise. Your mind just accepts the keys and car part as background fact.
Ah, I see. The verb realized carries the presupposition. What about something like, if you had listened to me, you wouldn't be in this mess?
Perfect. The clear presupposition there is, you didn't listen to me. It's embedded right in the if you had structure. Or a simple question, why did you steal the money?
Presupposes that I did steal the money.
Exactly. You can't answer the why without implicitly accepting the did. One more, often revealing biases. When did you stop beating your wife?
Whoa, yeah. Presupposes you were beating her. Nasty.
Right. So NLP uses the meta model to make these hidden assumptions explicit. Understanding them helps you decode someone's underlying beliefs, their model of the world, even their unconscious biases. And for you, the listener, recognizing presuppositions makes you a much sharper consumer of information. Think advertising, politics, media, and a more precise communicator yourself. You can avoid swallowing hidden premises and maybe even use them intentionally and ethically to frame things effectively.
Okay, this meta model stuff is incredibly powerful for understanding how language shapes reality. Now, let's shift to how NLP, and particularly Milton Erickson, use these kinds of linguistic insights for communication and change, especially in hypnotic patterns. Starting with the core strategy, pacing and leading.
Pacing and leading is absolutely fundamental to Erickson's approach, and really to any effective communication aimed at influence or rapport. Pacing is all about meticulously matching or joining the other person's current, ongoing, verifiable experience.
Verifiable, meaning things they know are true for them right now.
Exactly. Erickson might start very simply. You are sitting there, in that chair, listening to the sound of my voice, noticing the light in the room, feeling your feet on the floor. These are all statements the person can immediately confirm as true within their own direct experience.
So you're just describing what's happening, building agreement, building rapport, almost unconsciously.
Precisely. You're establishing an unconscious yes set, a foundation of trust and connection. Once you've successfully paced their reality, established that deep rapport, then you can begin
Bring
leading.
them somewhere new.
Gently, yes. Leading involves gradually introducing desired states, behaviors, ideas, or perspectives. And the link between pacing and leading is often incredibly simple, like the word and.
Just and.
Often, yes. Erickson might say, you are sitting there, listening to my voice, pacing. And you may begin to notice a feeling of relaxation spreading through your shoulders, leading. Because they are sitting and listening, the and allows the suggestion for relaxation to follow smoothly, almost inevitably, without feeling like a jarring command. It bypasses potential resistance.
And this connects back to that lack of referential index idea, using vague language, like a feeling of relaxation or a certain sensation.
Yes, exactly. It's a brilliant application. By intentionally using phrases that don't specify which sensation or which thought or which memory, Erickson leaves it wide open for the client to attach their own meaning.
It's not lazy vagueness, it's strategic ambiguity.
Perfectly put. It allows the client to actively participate in creating the meaning. They do their own transderivational search for what that certain sensation means to them right now. This makes the suggestion far more personal, deeply engaging, and ultimately much more powerful because it feels like it's coming from within them. It allows the communicator to pace the client's internal reality, even without knowing exactly what it is, giving infinite flexibility while ensuring relevance.
That's incredibly elegant. You create the frame, and they unconsciously fill it with their own experience. Okay, moving to even more subtle stuff. Indirect suggestions and ambiguity, like embedded commands.
Right. These are commands or questions cleverly hidden inside larger sentences. They're designed to be picked up and acted upon by the unconscious mind, while the conscious mind just hears a normal statement or question.
Give me an example.
Erickson might tell a story. I knew a man once who really learned how to relax completely. The phrase relax completely is the embedded command, subtly emphasized perhaps, that the unconscious hears and may respond to. Or, I'm wondering if you can feel comfortable now.
Feel comfortable is the command hidden in the wondering.
Exactly. The person isn't directly told feel comfortable, but their unconscious picks up the suggestion. And they often respond covertly, maybe shifting slightly, taking a deeper breath, without consciously deciding to.
So the command slips past the conscious gatekeeper. Powerful. What about conversational postulates?
These are everywhere in daily life. They sound like polite questions, usually about ability or possibility, but they function as commands. We process them automatically as commands.
Like, can you pass the salt?
Exactly. It sounds like, are you physically capable of passing the salt? But nobody answers yes and does nothing. They just pass the salt. The automatic interpretation is pass the salt. Erickson used these constantly. Can you allow your eyes to close? Is it possible for you to remember a time you felt confident? They sound like gentle inquiries, but they powerfully direct attention and behavior.
Okay, and you can even play with grammar itself. Punctuation ambiguity. That sounds tricky.
It is, and it's designed to gently confuse the conscious mind. You overlap two well-formed sentences with a pivot word that could belong to either sentence delivered smoothly. Like, I want you to notice the feeling in your hand. Me the book.
Whoa, okay. Hand is the pivot. My brain tries, notice the feeling in your hand, then stumbles and reparses, hand me the book.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That little moment of grammatical confusion, that stumble by the dominant analytical hemisphere, creates a brief window of opportunity. It disrupts the normal flow. In that instant of disorientation, the conscious filter is momentarily down, making the person more receptive to other suggestions. especially nonverbal ones, or embedded commands that follow immediately. It's a way to induce a light trance or heightened suggestibility just through syntax.
Clever. And phonological ambiguity uses sound-alike words.
Right. Words that sound the same but have different meanings. Homophones, like right, right, or no, no, or see, see. The speaker can use one word verbally, but subtly emphasize the other meaning through nonverbal cues, analogical marking.
Like saying, I want you to know, but subtly gesturing towards the eyes to imply no more doubts.
Something like that, yes. The conscious mind hears one thing. The unconscious picks up the analogically marked alternative meaning. Again, it's communication happening on multiple levels, bypassing conscious resistance.
Which brings us squarely to analogical marking. It's not just the words, it's how they're delivered that carries the deeper message, especially to the unconscious.
Absolutely critical. Analogical marking is the skillful use of all those nonverbal channels: tone of voice, pitch, tempo, pauses, gestures, posture shifts, facial expressions, eye contact changes, to subtly highlight or deliver a specific message embedded within the main communication.
And this is often unconscious for both speaker and listener.
Often, yes, in everyday life. But masters like Erickson used it with exquisite, conscious precision. He could use a tiny shift in his voice tone, a slight head tilt, a specific hand gesture to mark a key word or phrase, ensuring the client's unconscious mind received that specific message even while the conscious mind was focused on the surface story.
And because it bypasses the conscious filter.
It's often accepted without question, without challenge. It leads to deep, seemingly effortless shifts. There's like a hidden layer of communication constantly influencing us. It really underscores how much communication is truly nonverbal and unconscious.
It's like a direct line to the deeper mind. Now, speaking of Erickson, I remember reading something fascinating and counterintuitive about his approach. His deliberate use of boredom.
Yes. It sounds crazy for a hypnotist, right? You'd think you need to be captivating. But Erickson was famous for strategically using boredom.
How did that work? Why would that work?
He would sometimes speak in a very monotonous tone, go on long, rambling, seemingly irrelevant stories filled with minute details. He'd be deliberately, exquisitely boring.
To what end?
To the end that the client's conscious mind would just give up trying to follow. It would get overloaded or just plain bored and start to drift off, maybe into daydreams, turning attention inwards.
So the boredom bypasses the conscious critical factor.
Exactly. As the conscious mind disengaged, the unconscious became much more accessible, much more receptive to the indirect suggestions he was subtly weaving into those boring stories. For Erickson, especially later in life when he had, as the books say, all the time in the world, it was a primary tool for inducing trance. It's a brilliant understanding of how attention works.
That's genius in its simplicity, really. Lower the guard by being dull.
Yeah.
Okay, and then there's that incredibly detailed account of Aldous Huxley's experience being hypnotized by Erickson. Huxley was so intelligent and self-aware, his descriptions must be incredibly insightful.
They really are. Huxley's account is phenomenal because he was actively observing his own internal process during deep trance. He described this fascinating internal conflict. Part of him, the intellectual part, wanted to stay at a medium trance level to scientifically observe what was happening.
Like a researcher taking notes.
Exactly. But another part, a deeper, subjective part, felt this pull to just let go, to go deeper for comfort and exploration. He noticed that if he focused on the intrinsic value of external reality, the factual details of the room, the trance would lighten.
His analytical mind kicking back in.
Right. But if he shifted his focus to the subjective values, the feeling of the chair's comfort, the quality of the sounds, the trance would deepen instantly, pulling him further inward.
So he was actually steering his own trance depth by shifting his focus. Incredible self-awareness, even in that state.
It is. And he also discovered, almost with a sense of wonder, that he could actively generate vivid, hallucinatory experiences, even in a fairly light trance. He'd start by adding, say, a pleasant taste sensation to his existing physical comfort.
Just decided to taste something nice.
Apparently so. And from there, he found he could conjure up various tastes, then smells, and even kinesthetic sensations like the feeling of taking a long walk, all while still vaguely aware of Erickson talking. He noted that these inner-type hallucinations, generated purely internally, were much easier for him than trying to hallucinate something externally, like seeing something in the room that wasn't there. It just shows the mind's incredible power for internal reality creation.
Wow. Generating full sensory experiences internally. And he reflected afterwards on the value of it all, didn't he? Making distinctions about memory and feeling.
He did. Post-trance, he was amazed by the detailed memories he'd recovered. But he made a crucial distinction. He called those hypnotic memories primarily intellectual, maybe lacking deep emotional significance.
Interesting. Accurate, but maybe dry.
Perhaps. He contrasted that with experiences from what he called deep reflection, which seemed to yield for him inner enduring feelings that felt much more significant to his overall pattern of living. It suggests different altered states access or integrate information differently. Hypnosis gave him new perspectives, intellectual clarity, expanded possibilities. But this other state, deep reflection, seemed to tap into deeper emotional meaning. It hints at the richness and variety of inner exploration.
And at one point, Huxley actually told the Milton Erickson, to hush up. That must have been something.
It really must have been. It speaks volumes about how deeply absorbed Huxley was. He said he was finding it most extraordinarily interesting down here, and Erickson's constant talking was frightfully distracting and annoying.
Wow. He was so deep the guide became an interruption.
Exactly. It wasn't resistance. It was a sign of profound internal absorption. His physical signs, heart rate, breathing, would shift dramatically and inexplicably. He'd frequently ask for silence. It showed he was in a very deep, active trance, even with his eyes open sometimes, and that the client's internal journey can become paramount, even overriding the hypnotist's input. A powerful testament to the client's active role and the depth of the inner world.
Okay, that deep dive into hypnotic patterns is fascinating. Now, let's get to the really practical stuff. NLP techniques specifically designed for change and transformation, taking all these concepts and putting them to work. First up, reframing. Sounds like changing how you look at things.
That's the essence of it, yes. Reframing is about altering the way a person understands or perceives their own behavior, a situation, and experience. By changing that frame, the goal is to create what NLP calls freedom to maneuver.
Freedom to maneuver.
Meaning new choices, new meanings, new possibilities emerge, where before things felt stuck or limited. The core idea is that pretty much any behavior makes sense and is even appropriate in some context. The problem often isn't the behavior itself, but the context it's showing up in, or the meaning we've slapped onto it.
So it's not about forcing a behavior change directly, but changing the frame, the context, or the meaning around the behavior.
Precisely. And NLP talks about two main types, content reframing and context reframing. Content reframing changes the meaning of the behavior itself.
Example.
Okay, take stubbornness. In a family argument, that might be seen as purely negative, right? Problematic. But you reframe the meaning. Isn't that same stubbornness actually persistence? Determination. And isn't that incredibly valuable in other situations, like negotiating a contract or standing up for your rights?
So the same behavior, stubbornness, persistence, gets a different value, a different meaning, depending on the frame. Okay, what about context reframing?
Context reframing, as the name suggests, finds a different context where the problematic behavior would be appropriate or useful. You're not changing the meaning, but finding a place where it fits. A really powerful, maybe extreme example from the books is reframing the intention behind a suicidal part of someone.
Okay, how do you reframe that?
The reframe suggests that this part isn't actually aiming for destruction in a negative way. At a deeper level, its positive intention might be to achieve ultimate peace, an end to unbearable suffering, a state of heaven on earth. The intent is positive, seeking peace, even if the behavior chosen, suicide, is tragic and destructive. This points to a core NLP belief.
Which is?
That every behavior, no matter how messed up or undesirable it looks on the surface, has a positive intention or serves some positive function at its root.
Wow, that's a radical assumption, isn't it? To believe every behavior, even destructive ones, starts from a positive intent. That changes everything about how you approach a problem.
It's absolutely fundamental in NLP. It shifts the whole dynamic. Take someone who struggles with overeating. The part of them driving that might, at a deeper level, be trying to protect them from unwanted attention, or maybe provide comfort, or maybe even motivate them through a kind of reverse psychology, a polarity response.
Polarity response.
Yeah, like if you tell that part directly, stop eating so much, it might resist even harder, eat more, as a way of asserting its underlying positive function, whatever that might be. So the NLP approach isn't to fight the behavior, like stop overeating.
What is it then?
It's to first respect the positive intention, then separate that positive intention from the problematic behavior, and finally find new, healthier, more ecological ways to achieve that same positive intention.
Ecological, meaning?
Meaning solutions that are good for the whole person, the whole system, not just fixing one problem by creating another one somewhere else. It's about finding ways to get the protection or the comfort or the motivation without the unwanted side effect of overeating. It's about respecting the deeper purpose and finding better ways to fulfill it.
Okay, and there's a structured way to do this, right? The six-step reframing model. Can you walk us through that maybe with a quick example? Say, someone procrastinates a lot.
Perfect example.
Okay,
The six-step reframing process. Let's call our listener Alex, and Alex wants to stop procrastinating on important work tasks.
step one.
Step 1. Identify the pattern. Alex clearly defines the behavior.
Yeah.
I want to stop procrastinating on my important tasks. Be specific.
Step two.
Step 2. Establish communication with the part. Alex internally addresses the part responsible for the procrastination. Assume it has a positive intent. Ask it to give a signal, a feeling, an image, a sound if it's willing to communicate. Maybe Alex feels a slight tension in their shoulders as a yes signal. If there's reluctance, you might ask something like, do you trust that your unconscious mind is ultimately trying to help you, even if you don't consciously get how right now? Build rapport with the part.
Okay, got the signal. Step three.
Step 3. Discover the positive intention. Alex asked the part directly, what are you trying to do for me by having me procrastinate? What's the positive purpose? The answer might come as a feeling, a thought. Maybe I'm trying to protect you from feeling overwhelmed, or I'm keeping you safe from potential failure or criticism. Find the positive motive.
Makes sense. Step four.
Step 4. Engage a creative part. Alex asked the procrastination part to go connect with a separate, really creative part of their unconscious mind. The job now is to brainstorm new, effective, and ecological ways to achieve that original positive intention, protection from overwhelmed failure, without resorting to procrastination.
So find alternative strategies.
Exactly. Ideas might bubble up. Break tasks into tiny steps. Schedule short, focused work blocks. Ask for help when feeling overwhelmed. Reward myself for starting. Generate options.
Okay, got some new ideas. Step five.
Step 5. Evaluate the new alternatives. The original procrastination part now reviews these new options. Alex internally asks it, are these new ways at least as good as or better than procrastination at fulfilling my need for protection? Are they readily available? If the part isn't fully satisfied, back to the creative part for more options until there are several really good, viable ones.
And the final step, 6.
Step 6. Select and test. The part chooses the most appealing new strategy or combination. Alex then makes an internal commitment to use this new approach consistently for a set period, say, the next 3 weeks, to really embed the change. For Alex, maybe it's committing to the tiny steps method for all new projects.
And I bet future pacing fits in here too, right? To make sure it sticks.
Absolutely essential. Future pacing is mentally rehearsing the new behavior in situations where the old pattern used to occur. Alex would vividly imagine starting a challenging task next week, feel that old flicker of wanting to put it off, but then easily and automatically implement the tiny step strategy, see themselves making progress, feel the release and satisfaction. This rehearsal wires the new pattern into their neurology, makes it more automatic and robust in the real world.
That's a really clear process. And you mentioned this can even apply to phobias, though maybe not always the fastest way.
Yes, you can use reframing for phobias. Find the positive intention. Maybe the phobia provides extreme motivating protection from perceived danger, even if it's irrational. Then find new ways to get that protection without the crippling fear. However, the NLP literature often points to the visual kinesthetic dissociation technique, sometimes called the fast phobia cure, as being much quicker and more direct for phobias specifically, because it directly rewires the fear response itself, rather than just changing the meaning around it. Both work, but one's often faster for that specific issue.
Got it. Okay, beyond reframing, another huge NLP technique is anchoring. This sounds like creating triggers for states.
That's exactly what it is. Anchoring is the process of associating an internal state, a feeling like confidence, calm, motivation, or even a problematic state you want to understand with a specific external trigger.
What kind of trigger?
Could be anything distinct and repeatable. A touch on a specific spot, like your knuckle or shoulder, a particular word or sound, a visual cue, like making a fist. Think Pavlov's dog salivating at the bell. The bell was the anchor for the salivation response. We can do this deliberately with human states.
So you can intentionally anchor a positive state, like peak confidence, maybe by squeezing your fist while you intensely recall feeling confident, and then later trigger that confident feeling just by squeezing your fist again.
Precisely. It gives you on-demand access to your own resources. An anchor can stabilize a desired state, make it readily available, or, interestingly, it can also be used to stabilize a problematic state, Not to keep it, but to hold it steady so you can examine it, understand its structure, maybe go back and sort through the experiences connected to it. And a really powerful application described in the books is with compulsive behaviors like alcoholism.
Right, you mentioned this earlier, challenging the once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic idea. How does anchoring do that?
It's radical. The goal isn't just managing the behavior, it's changing the fundamental trigger response. Instead of the sight or thought of alcohol automatically triggering that overwhelming compulsive state.
The craving, the need.
The goal is to re-anchor alcohol so it becomes just a drink, something the person can choose to have one of or choose not to have, and then walk away completely free from that internal compulsion.
How do you make alcohol just a drink for someone caught in that pattern?
The process might involve first anchoring the undesired compulsive state, getting clear on that pattern. Then building and anchoring powerful, resourceful states, feelings of choice, freedom, self-control, indifference to alcohol, connection to healthier goals. The crucial step, the real test, is then collapsing the anchors, or testing the integration by reintroducing the old trigger in a safe way.
Like actually having a drink.
Maybe. Under controlled, supportive circumstances, if the person can have that single drink, experience it genuinely as just a beverage, feel no compulsion, and easily put it down and walk away feeling fine. That demonstrates the old automatic link is broken. The anchor has been changed. They now have choice, where before there was only compulsion. It fundamentally shifts the identity from alcoholic to a person who used to have a problem with alcohol but now has choice. It's profound.
That really is a paradigm shift. Proving the old automatic response is gone. Okay, what about using these ideas for internal conflict, like when different parts of you are at war? Or even conflict between people?
Internal conflict is huge. That feeling of being pulled in two directions. The part that wants to be healthy versus the part that enjoys unhealthy habits. The part that wants to speak up versus the part that fears rejection. NLP sees these as conflicts between different parts with different positive intentions.
And anchoring can help here too.
Yes, using a technique often called collapsing anchors. You might anchor the state associated with one part, say on the left knee, and the state associated with the conflicting part, say on the right knee. Then you fire both anchors simultaneously.
Trigger both feelings at once. What happens?
Often there's a moment of confusion, maybe disorientation, maybe even laughter or strange sensations. That's a sign the brain is actively working to integrate the two conflicting states. It forces them to coexist. The outcome is often a feeling of resolution, internal peace, and the emergence of new integrated behaviors that somehow satisfy the positive intentions of both previously warring parts. The conflict dissolves into a higher level integration.
Wow. Okay. And applying similar ideas to conflicts between people, you mentioned the agreement frame.
Yes, the agreement frame is a fantastic structure for moving beyond surface arguments in relationships, negotiations, any interpersonal conflict. It shifts the focus from positions to underlying needs or intentions.
How does it work?
First, you get really specific about what each person wants, their stated outcome. I want us to go to the mountains for a vacation. Well, I want us to go to the beach. Okay, those are the positions.
Step 2.
You ask each person for their meta outcome, which means what will getting your specific outcome, mountains, beach, do for you? What's the deeper purpose or value behind that?
So why do you want the mountains? Why the beach?
Exactly. Maybe the mountains person says, it will give me peace, quiet, a feeling of escape. Maybe the beach person says, it will give me relaxation, fun, quality time together. Okay, now we have deeper needs. Peace, escape, relaxation, fun, quality time.
And step 3.
You look for a common outcome, a shared meta outcome that both parties can genuinely agree on, even if it's quite general. In this case, maybe something like, so can we agree that our goal here is to find a vacation plan that allows us both to feel relaxed, have fun, find some peace, and spend quality time together?
Find the overlapping need.
Yes. Once you have that higher level agreement, that shared frame, we both want relaxation, fun, quality time, it completely reframes the conflict. Now, you're not arguing mountains versus beach. You're collaborating on finding a solution that meets those shared underlying needs. Maybe it's a compromise location, maybe it's structuring the trip differently, but you're working together towards a shared goal, which makes finding specific solutions much, much easier.
That makes so much sense. Find the shared why before arguing about the what. Now, you mentioned that phrase, psychotic realities, from the source material earlier. Sounds intense. What do they mean by that?
Yeah, it's a deliberately provocative phrase from the books. It's used to describe the distinct, self-consistent, and often quite rigid shared belief systems, rituals, and ways of seeing the world that different groups develop. They use the example of, say, a group of humanistic psychologists holding hands and gazing deeply into each other's eyes.
Okay, I can picture that.
Contrasted with a group of people from an electronics corporation who would likely find that behavior utterly bizarre and unprofessional. Their reality involves data, flowcharts, efficiency.
Two totally different worlds, different rules.
Exactly. Each group operates within its own internally consistent reality, its own set of assumptions and acceptable behaviors. And to an outsider from the other group, their reality might seem crazy or psychotic. NLP doesn't judge which reality is right. It recognizes they are all constructed models.
So what does NLP do with these different realities?
It focuses on navigating between them, finding common ground where possible, building rapport across the differences, or working effectively within an individual's or group's specific model to communicate or facilitate change. It's about respecting the integrity of each person's map, even if it looks completely different from your own, and finding ways to bridge the gap, whether it's therapy, business negotiation, or cultural understanding.
Okay, fascinating. Finally, let's talk about mobilizing resources and breaking patterns. There was that really intense story about Juan and Carlos, illustrating extreme motivation.
Ah, yes, the Juan and Carlos example. It's definitely extreme, designed to illustrate a very direct, powerful technique for overcoming hesitation and unlocking potential. Juan wanted Carlos to be fully congruent, fully present, using all his capabilities all the time, no holding back.
So what did he do?
He gave Carlos this incredibly stark linguistic intervention. He told him, essentially paraphrasing here, any moment you hesitate, any moment you put off doing something new you could do today, just glance over your left shoulder, you'll see a fleeting shadow. That shadow is your death. At any moment, it might step forward, touch your shoulder, and take you. So the act you're doing right now might be your very last. Make it fully representative of you.
Wow. That is intense. A constant memento mori, basically. Live every moment as if it's your last, because it might be. No time for hesitation.
Exactly. It's designed to obliterate procrastination and ensure every action is congruent and fully expressed. Certainly not a technique for every situation, but it illustrates the power of framing to mobilize resources. And then, on a gentler note, there's the metaphor from The Adventures of Anybody.
Right, where anybody wants to be somebody special.
Yes. He goes on this whole quest, seeking external validation, specialness, only to learn from a wise old man at the end that he already is special. That the resources, the uniqueness he was searching for outside, were actually inside him all along.
It's that classic journey of self-discovery, isn't it? Finding the resources within, often when you feel most lost or trapped. Realizing you had the key all along.
It perfectly captures that NLP principle. The resources are generally already inside the person's model of the world. The work is often about accessing them, recognizing them, mobilizing them. And speaking of feeling trapped, NLP has a really useful reframe for resistance from clients.
Instead of seeing it as the client being difficult or defiant.
Exactly. Resistance isn't seen as stubbornness. It's reframed as valuable feedback. It's a communication from the client's unconscious saying essentially, look, this approach isn't working for me, or maybe make some new arrangements so we don't have to go through that old pain again. It's a signal to the practitioner to change their approach.
Which connects to that other powerful idea. If the client isn't getting the result, it's not their fault. That's a statement about the therapist, not the client.
Precisely. If a client can't find an image or access a feeling or generate a new behavior with the current method, it means the practitioner needs to be more flexible, more skillful, and try something different. It puts the onus for adaptability squarely on the person facilitating the change. It demands continuous learning and responsiveness, not blaming the client.
So we've covered a huge amount of ground here. We've taken this really deep dive into neuro-linguistic programming. We've looked at its revolutionary origins, how it really broke away from a lot of traditional thinking, and explored some of its incredibly powerful practical tools and techniques.
It's quite a journey through the structure of experience.
It really is. What this deep dive highlights, I think, is NLP as this incredibly insightful approach to understanding the whole spectrum of human experience, communication, and how deep change actually happens. And the key seems to be shifting focus away from just the content, the story, the problem.
And focusing intensely on the how, the underlying structure. How do we process information? How do we build these internal maps? And crucially, how can we consciously, skillfully repattern our internal worlds for the better? And if you pull back to the bigger picture, what NLP fundamentally suggests is that we have this, well, almost infinite range of choices in how we use information, how we perceive ourselves and others, how we interact with our own model of the world. It gives you a pragmatic toolkit for making explicit the implicit patterns running our lives.
It's not about finding the one right answer.
No, it's about understanding the structure of experience, period.
Yeah.
Once you grasp the structure, you gain flexibility, you gain choice. That's the real power.
And that leads to a really important, maybe even provocative question for you, our listener, to take away from this. Thinking about everything we've explored, how you filter reality through deletion, distortion, generalization, how your language literally shapes your world via things like presuppositions and nominalizations, how your internal states get anchored to triggers, how might these insights change the way you listen, the way you speak, the way you perceive the world around you, and maybe even more importantly, the world inside you?
It's an invitation to become more aware.
Exactly. I invite you to just start noticing. Notice the subtle language patterns in your daily conversations with others, yes, but also pay close attention to your own internal dialogue. What assumptions, what presuppositions are running unnoticed in the background? What crucial information might you be deleting from your awareness without realizing it? What meanings are you assigning to events or behaviors, yours or others, that might be limiting your options?
Just the noticing can start the change.
Just by bringing awareness to these deep, often unconscious patterns, you begin to unlock a whole new way of engaging with your own amazing, complex, and ultimately changeable model of the world. Thank you for listening to The Heart of Mastery. Keep exploring, keep evolving, and I'll see you again soon.